TD Bank is in crisis as the bank reports its first loss in 2 decades. That's over 20 years, guys. So obviously things are not going well at TD Bank. So TD posts a rare loss in third quarter after setting aside US $2.6 billion in money laundering probe. This is not a good thing for TD. Whichever way you spin it, a loss is a loss at the end of the day, and there's a cost that they're going to have to pay for this. And how are they going to absorb that cost in a worsening environment for all their debt slaves? So obviously TD Bank swings to quarterly loss after $2.6 billion hit tied to US probe. So let's get into it. So TD Bank on Thursday reported its first loss in over 2 decades after setting aside an extra $2.6 billion to cover unexpected fines from US regulators, which have been probing weaknesses in Canada's second largest lender's anti-money laundering controls. Now, I will recommend a book here, which is Willful Blindness. Really interesting book. I would definitely recommend that you read that because it's all about the money laundering in Canada and how it goes right to the top in terms of politics. Incredibly interesting book. It was actually one of you guys that put me onto that book, so I can't thank you enough. Thanks a lot, Eric. But anyway, what's going on here with TD? Isn't it funny how it's only took US regulators to find out about this? Like, this has snuck past the Canadian regulators for a long time, and they finally found this out through the US regulators probing into TD Bank's business, which I think is just so interesting, and once again just shows how the power structures in Canada just keep everything under wraps. So TD said late Wednesday that it would sell part of its 12.3% stake in US brokerage Charles Schwab to help offset the impact of the fine, for which it had already provisioned $450 million in the prior quarter. So when you're having to sell your assets to cover a loss, it's just not a good sign. I don't care how you spin it. And at the end of the day, TD Bank is not the first bank that we've had that has reported a loss. We'll get onto that in a second. So TD Bank's stock is down around 3.68% in Canadian dollars. If you pull it out to 5 years, it's up 11.09%. So in real terms, it's down a lot because obviously in 5 years, inflation has been a lot higher than 11.04%. And today, the stock did tank initially after the earnings were released, but it has recovered somewhat. It's recovered nearly 3%, and now it's down just over 2%. So it's really interesting. You've got Laurentian Bank also that reported $117.5 million loss in the second quarter as revenue falls. And a lot of you may not know who this bank is, but they're a primary dealer and they're a big bank in Quebec and they're a systemic bank in Canada, which is important when you put together all the pieces of this puzzle. So obviously them selling assets, not a good thing. And then let's see what the spin doctor said. So although this is a large amount, we remain well capitalized. I'm confident that we are doing all the right things to manage through this. That's what the TD CEO said. I mean, that just sounds like complete spin that he's trying to put on it. The US regulatory probes relate to allegations that Chinese drug traffickers used the bank to launder at least $650 million from 2016 to 2021, and an employee took a bribe to facilitate laundering of drug money. Obviously, where did most of that money go into probably and come out of, guys? Probably real estate. That's where a lot of the money goes into. The money launderers love the real estate, especially in the Vancouver area, because they're coming from China. For some reason, they obsess over that area, although it's spilled over a lot in the recent years into places like Calgary as well. So the bank says it expects to resolve the matter by year end and flagged that regulators could also impose non-monetary restrictions. This is restrictions on growth and such. And what's really interesting, and you've just got to think, is TD is just the first bank. Obviously, you've got other banks that are also operating in the States. All of them, in fact, of the big five are all operating in the States as well. You've got RBC's US subsidiary. You've got BMO that has a US subsidiary that's actually quite large. You've also got Scotiabank, and obviously TD is the largest in terms of their US presence, but all of the big five Canadian banks are trying to grow in the United States. And obviously TD also was trying to take over that bank called First Horizon Bank, before that deal fell apart, and that actually led into this probe, which which is really, really interesting. So anyway, Laurentian Bank, they reported a massive loss. And when you look at what they said about what's going on with the loss here, Laurentian Bank of Canada reported a second quarter loss of 117.5 million compared with net income of 49.3 million a year earlier. So a huge difference. And we're going to have to watch because Laurentian Bank reports, I believe it's next week or the week after. So we'll see what goes on with their earnings. And we're going to see if many of the other banks that also are reporting next week have any surprises for us, have any losses. I mean, you've just got to think about the credit profile right now in Canada. And you've just got to think of how the credit environment, the environment for lending, is just getting worse and worse in Canada. A shocking number, total mortgage balance reaching severe delinquency, exceeds 1 billion for the first time in Ontario. And then you go to a bank like TD, you check out their assets, which is comprised mostly of loans of 1.96 trillion, and then their liabilities that are 1.84 trillion. So they've got 12 billion available there between their liabilities and their assets. So they're pretty well leveraged there when you really think about what's going on. You've got stuff like this happening, as well as what's happening with the money laundering probe. And I don't think that TD will be the only bank here. Like I said, I'm expecting other banks in the coming years will also be found out to be doing the exact same thing, because this money laundering problem that Canada has is very, very wide reaching. And especially, I can't recommend that book. In fact, I think I've got an Amazon affiliate link in the description for that book. I would highly recommend that you read it. It's just a real fantastic book. And then you also had Scotiabank that had this unexplained technical issue which came right on payday. Again, it's a little bit suspicious because what was obviously happening with Scotiabank on payday, you had a lot of money that they had to suddenly come up with. And when you look at the repo volume within the repo market and how that has spiked since the Bank of Canada started cutting rates, it does not say good things about your banking system. When you've got the repo market spiking, when you've got multiple banks reporting losses, very systemic banks, it doesn't matter what they say. The reason is for that loss, they are very leveraged and they are in an environment where their assets, particularly all their mortgage exposure, their credit card debt exposure, all of that stuff is becoming worth less and less and less. So it's absolutely crazy what is going on here in China. I mean, Canada, sorry. China. I can't believe I did that. But it is crazy. And you know, this money, and I would highly recommend that you check out that book. Anyway, guys, I want to thank you so much for watching this video. And thanks, Terry, for sending me that article. If you've enjoyed this video, I'd highly recommend that you check out this video here. And if you're looking for a VPN to protect your privacy, you know where to go. Go to expressvpn.com/marketmania, affiliate link in the description. And you need a VPN in Canada these days. I will see you in the next one. Take care.